get this question all the time, but what's a good bike to start on? Well, I decided to pick 5 good starter bikes that are affordable, and each bike can fulfill a certain need for everyone. No one motorcycle is perfect for everybody, so this relatively diverse list will help you pick up something that's right for you. So number 1 on our list will be the Yamaha R3. For the money, this is a really solid bike, packing a panty-dropping 321cc parallel twin motor, cranking out roughly 42 bhp with a 6-speed transmission and super light 368 pounds wet, and a low 31-inch seat height. Scooting from 0 to 60 in just around 5 seconds with a top speed of 110 miles per hour, the R3 is more than adequate for around town and even on the highway. The R3 would be a great commuter bike since it achieves 56 miles per gallon and is much more comfortable to ride than a super sport. I chose the R3 because it simply outclasses the other bikes in its competition, being the fastest and lightest of all 300cc sport bikes. I would never recommend buying a new bike for your first bike, but at the cheap price of just $4,999, this bike is easily obtainable for anyone, and you won't lose much on the resale value either. This bike is perfect for the person who wants to get into riding, but wants something sporty looking too. If you want to buy a bike to impress the ladies, then don't worry about anything bigger than a 300, since most girls won't even be able to tell the difference between a 300 and 600 anyway. However, there are a couple chinks in the R3's armor, but there's only one that's worth mentioning, and that's that there's no optional ABS available, which can be a deal breaker for a lot of new riders. Honorable mentions would have to be the Ninja 300, which is easier to find used and has optional ABS and a nice to have slipper clutch, and the CBR 300R, which is cheaper at $4,500 new and has optional ABS. The next bike on our list is for those of us who are poor. I'm talking about people with about $1,000 to $2,000 maximum budget. So number 2 will be the Kawasaki Ninja 250. From 1986 to 2012, Kawasaki has made a Ninja 250. From 86 to 2007, you had the pre-gen Ninja 250, and from 2008 to 2012, you had the new gen 250. They both featured very similar engines with minor differences. This was the starter bike up until about 3 years ago. I'm serious, this was the bike everyone started out on. I started out on a pre-gen and then soon after bought a new gen. And after owning both, I can tell you that they are similar in terms of power, which is around 29 brake horsepower give or take. These bikes are light, unintimidating, easy to ride, cheap to buy and own. They are honestly the perfect beginner bike because, let's be honest, there's a good chance you will sell your 250 in favor of something better. So why buy something fancy and new when you can get a cheap old girl who's been around the block a few times? This will be the bike that you will learn on, ride, drop, and sell for exactly what you paid, or maybe even possibly make a few bucks. The truth is, I could talk about these bikes all day. They are seriously special machines that will always have a place in my heart. Do not hesitate on buying one if you are on the fence. They are absolutely amazing motorcycles, and you have nothing to really lose with them. They hold their value very well. My only heed of warning is to watch out for the carburetors. Unless you are mechanically inclined, dealing with carbs can be a chore, and if you are not up to the task of maintaining them, then maybe this won't be the bike for you. Honorable mentions would have to be the CBR 250R, which is fuel injected so it's less maintenance focused, but is somehow even slower than the Ninja 250 and a lot uglier as well. Also, it's more expensive on the used market, but still found for short money and holds its value even better because of its EFI. So you want to get a starter bike that you can grow with, one that will be good and fast enough for years to come, but yet be easy to ride, economical, and keep up with the bigger bikes? Does such a bike exist? Well, it does. My number 3 pick would be the FZ07. I know I'm going to catch some flack for this because many consider the FZ07 too much for a beginner, but I would have to disagree. I think a new rider can learn on one. And if you are someone who has had some dirt bike experience, or at least the MSF course, then I see most riders having no trouble starting on one. Also, naked bikes are totally in right now, and the FZ07 has a great engine, plenty of power, about 75 brake horsepower to be exact, and roughly 50 foot-pounds of torque, which is more torque than a 600cc Super Sport. This bike weighs 397 pounds, so it's easy to manage for anyone. It's a naked bike, which means it's easy to work on without having to remove fairings. Not that you'll be doing that much anyway, because Yamaha is one of the most reliable motorcycles you can buy. The seat is low enough for short riders, 31.7 inches, yet if you're a taller guy, you still will not feel cramped on the bike either. The FZ07 is absolutely the perfect beginner bike in my eyes for those of you who don't want a slow bike but also don't want to kill yourselves either. This is unlikely to be a bike you'll get bored of anytime soon, however it will power wheelie, so when first learning, make sure you never grab a fistful of throttle in first or second gear. You could pick up an FZ07 for around $7,200. They also have additional ABS brakes for an additional $300. You can find these bikes used for sometimes as low as $5,000, but they are few and far between because most people don't sell theirs. Also, they achieve 58 miles per gallon, which is even more economical than the smaller Yamaha R3. This bike is for the person who wants to commute and have plenty of power on the highway while staying very comfortable on a reliable, cheap-to-own motorcycle. Just whatever you guys do not be tempted to pick up the FZ09. It's only a little bit more money, but trust me, the 09 is a much different animal entirely and definitely not good for a new rider. Honorable mentions would be the SV650 and the Ninja 650, which would be found cheaper on the used market, and both have considerable amounts of power for the highway while still being friendly for a beginner. Number 4. Suzuki DRZ400S. This is for you tall guys out there. With a seat height of 36.8 inches, anyone under the height of 5'10" will have a hard time even fitting on this bike when it's stock. I am 5'8" and I can barely touch the ground on this bike, but there are a couple options like a shaved seat which would allow someone with my height to touch the ground just fine, but for even shorter riders then there's always smaller wheels and lower in lengths as well. DRZs have a cult following, and for good reason. They are amazing motorcycles, virtually unchanged since 1998, with just some minor adjustments here and there. Also, these bikes have tons of aftermarket support. Brand new, these bikes will run you $6,500, but there is a plethora of good examples on Craigslist for as low as $2,000. I would definitely recommend going for one that's used. As I said before, these bikes are virtually unchanged, so you are not getting much more by going with a newer model, except that hefty price tag. The only downsides of this bike that I can think of is that it's carbureted, so if you are not mechanically inclined, then that could be an issue. And also, it's only a 5-speed transmission, which is actually not a huge deal at all, just a nitpicking thing. And with its price point so close to the FZ07, if you don't go off-roading, then I honestly don't see you even bothering with this bike at all. You're probably better off with the FZ07. But if you do any off-roading or intend to buy used, then this bike beats the FZ07 hands down for obvious reasons. This bike can go on the highway, around town, and around the city, and of course off-road. This is a bike that will hold its resale value pretty well and will be hard to lose on, especially if you buy used. The most important thing is that you can drop this bike 100 times and cause less damage than a single drop in an R3. Also, plastics and replacement parts are dirt cheap. It cranks out around 40 brake horsepower and has about 29 foot-pounds of torque. All of that at a light weight of around 320 pounds wet, making this the lightest bike on this list. This thing will go on the highway, but if you're going to be on the highway for a long time, then perhaps you should look at other options. Honorable mentions would have to include the WR250R, which only costs about $200 more, which features fuel injection and a 6th gear. The CRF 250L is available for $5,200, and the KLX 250S are only available used. However, their cheap price is reflective over their lackluster performance compared to the DRZ and the WR250R. Number 5 and our last bike will be the modest Honda VFR 800. If you guys are not new to my channel, then you know I ride a 1991 VFR 750. These bikes are legendary, and mine has 50,000 miles and is still super reliable to this day. I recommend the VFR 800 to anyone who wants to do any long distance commuting or sport touring. This is the most powerful bike on this list, coming in at around 110-ish horsepower and about 60 foot-pound of torque. This bike has some serious get up and go and will leave a smile on your face every time. I struggled to put the VFR 800 on this list as it's a very hard choice because it's definitely a powerful bike, but I needed a good sport touring bike to put on the list, and the VFR fit the bill perfectly, weighing in at a hefty 520 pounds wet. This may seem like a bad thing to a lot of new riders because if you drop it, it'll be more difficult to pick up. But honestly, the weight is actually a good thing as it makes the bike more planted, which will be hard to accidentally wheelie and will feel more stable on the highway with little to no drama. You're probably most likely going to have to look into the ones from 02 to 09 because they're the most common. The VFRs all have a single-sided swing arm, and the 02 to 09 models even have that undertail exhaust. The bikes are comfortable, fast, and economical, achieving MPGs from 45 to 55 miles per gallon. Also, I see examples of these bikes on Craigslist with over 100,000 miles. Most of the owners claimed that they were never even inspected the valves before, so needless to say, these engines are spot on. Honorable mention would be the Versi 650. Now, a little bit of a bonus for 3 categories that I didn't cover, and the first would be for the strictly urban folks who live in the city or suburbs and only want to commute short distances and who deal with traffic on the daily. And my pick would be the incredibly amazing, fearless Honda Grom. Being a small 125cc displacement motorcycle, it is able to achieve over 100 miles per gallon, and at a price point of just $3,000, it is hard to beat for what you are getting. It's reliable and tons of fun. If you live in an area where you can lane split, then this bike was second to none when the traffic gets heavy, as it only weighs about 225 pounds, so it's super flickable and can zip in and out of traffic with little to no drama. But be warned that these are not highway capable. With a top speed of around 65 miles per hour, I'm not even sure if they're legal to go on the highway. And also, you are smaller on these bikes, so there's a question about safety, as it's more difficult for cars to see you. Honorable mention would obviously be the Z125. Both bikes are very similar, so just take your pick. And of course, the other category is cruisers, and I didn't put them on my top 5 because it's hard for me to recommend a cruiser as I have almost no experience with them. But the general rule of thumb is that for a V-twin, you want to stay under 1000 cc's, as they have so much bottom end torque that they can actually set you up for some trouble. When looking for cruisers, just look for something smaller like a Kawasaki Vulcan 650 or a Honda CTX 700. And for those of you who want to ride on the track mostly, or even exclusively, then look no further than the KTM RC390. With its small displacement, low price point, and aggressive ergos, the RC390 is the perfect beginner track bike since it is simple to learn on, very forgiving, and tons of fun. Well, that's the end of this video, everyone. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, then please leave a like on this video and subscribe. I make new motorcycle related videos every single week, and if you have any requests, then feel free to let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, take care, and bye-bye. Let me live my life, the one I'd better lead. All the blondes of fantasies, and we looked at them 11 ways. You said, look at me, I looked away, and you wrote the song I wanna play. Alright.